Ruler School is brought to you by Happy Little Hug Factory and these amazing patrons. Extra special thank you to guest lecturer patrons Brody Harris and Lance Albertson. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video. Hey there guys, DMO73 here, back from longer than we expected, Force of Will, a long amount of time away, and we are back with the Teacher's Lounge, the Force of Will podcast, as always, featuring myself and Ryan Miles.
Hey everybody.
Brandan Bremont, whose audio isn't going to break this time.
Good afternoon.
Frank Closser.
I'm back.
And we are back to talk about a lot of cool stuff, including the beginning of spoilers. We're getting pretty pumped over here. But before we get into that, we want to talk about one of the big events that just happened this past weekend, which was Gen Con. If you were maybe not aware, Gen Con is pretty much the biggest board gaming, card gaming, role-playing convention in the entirety of the United States. The Force of Will team, including myself and Frank, were there working the booth. We got to show off some really awesome spoilers, and there was a big tournament, and showed off the game to lots of cool people, and the team from Malaysia was there too. It was really an awesome time. So I thought myself and Frank can kind of share our experience a little bit, and we can talk about the Gen Con championship that kind of occurred. And Frank, I'll let you speak more to that. So Frank, why don't you gonna kind of tell us a little bit about your Gen Con experience?
So I've been going the last 3 years. I've played in the championship each of the years, and then the last 2 years, I've like worked the Force of Will booth about a day and a half, and so for like a day, and then for several hours among the other days, I teach I run new players through the demo decks, generally taking them through all the game's basic mechanics, like explaining how it can work, and then hopefully getting them excited, showing them deck building rules. This year, convincing a bunch of them to buy Rhea specifically, so that we sold out of that starter deck first.
We definitely did. We definitely did.
I did a good job. They were like, which one would you suggest? And I gave basic descriptions of all of them, and all of them were like, yeah, that one, the cool vampire lady.
Kirik is so-and-so, and Gil's so-and-so, and Rhea, now this is the cool one.
No,
and...
I specifically listed Kirik as the second best deck in the format, and Gil is the best late-game deck in the format. And then said, Rhea has not been quite there, but she does all of these cool things.
I'm just imagining being like, so Kirik right here is the second best deck in the entire game right now, and then here's Rhea, and you just don't tell them it's the best deck, but you phrase it like that, so they're like, whoa, Rhea, and that's how you got them.
We did sell out of it, I think we sold out of it by like 11 a.m. on Saturday. Like, we were completely out of Rhea.
Wow.
It's very quick.
Yeah, I mean, vampires sell more than scaly dragon lizards, and I don't even remember what the pandas.
But we had a lot of people there, and the cool thing was we had a lot of players teaching players at the booth because of the cool reward system we were using. So it was kind of like we made the congoers kind of do a work for us, but at the same time it really kept the booth really busy, and like a lot of people were really interested in it and really getting hyped, and more players kept coming and coming and coming. The booth was like always busy. It was awesome.
Yeah. The basic gist of it was like we had a big like stamp sheet for them. So every time they came back and played a game, brought a friend, just visited the booth again, there were a couple slots for beating the teachers with like some custom decks we brought. Like for each of those, they got stamped, and they could trade those in for prizes, which were like con exclusive coins, booster packs, play mats from like the last several seasons of GPs.
Yeah, it was a really good time. And then there was the tournament, which was Billy Wotton's, like, he's going for the hat trick because he won the past 2 years. Frank, I wasn't there for the tournament. I just watched the finals. But how did that go?
So the tournament itself was pretty simple. Like it wasn't a huge turnout this year, although it's been pretty medium sized, with the exception of the year where it was a full makeup GP and we had prize cards. But Billy was there, Blandon was there, I was there. Then we had some more, we had basically some more people who aren't well known at the moment, but have traveled with some of those players a bunch and have performed reasonably. And then we also had several people who this was their first competitive rules enforcement event.
Gotcha.
And so Swiss went pretty cleanly. I actually think this was the first event I've been at where we had more rounds finished before time was called than not. I think we only went
Nice.
to. I think we only went 2-time 1 round.
Nice.
After Swiss was done, we were at top 4, which was myself, Zach Bain, a gentleman named Jamie, this was his first event, and then Billy Buttons. And so Billy and Zach ended up being our 2 finalists, and he could not complete the hat trick. But
Yeah.
we found out after the fact he does still have an invite.
Yeah, they did decide that first and second at Gen Con ended up walking away with unpaid invites. That's pretty cool that he's going to get to go back to Worlds 3 years in a row.
Yep.
Sweet, sweet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And yeah, just the booth in general was a lot of fun. It was really cool to see. It was really cool to meet with the Malaysian team of Alan and Dick. They had a lot of really awesome ideas and were really just listening to players of the game a lot. And there's just a lot of excitement. It was a lot of people really loving the game and like teaching their friends or bringing their friends back. And sure, we were enticing them with packs and stuff, but it didn't feel like they were just there just to get free product. It sounded like the people who kept coming back were like eager to show their friends this game as something that they could do together.
Well, and to like give an example of them not just coming back for like free stuff like coins and stuff that they can like just use because they look cool. We had to have had like a good half dozen to a dozen people each day who like after they came back picked up like a starter deck and asked for advice on like we had all of the current clusters booster boxes, and they bought a box to pair with to like try and pair with their starter deck so they could get the best stuff to like beef it up. So like we had many new players who were actively investing in starting into the game.
Yeah, it was really awesome. And the other real cool thing that came out of Gen Con is we actually got a bunch of spoilers. So what I'd kind of like to do as a kind of step into our next big part of our discussion, I want to quickly kind of go over the spoilers that we got from Gen Con. Interestingly enough, and I think this was brilliant on Cody's part, the people that he demoed with, if they were brand new to the game and they right there after doing the demo like signed up to like the willpower system and like get involved in everything else, he would reward them for doing that by letting them be the one to share a spoiler. So like here were brand new players to the game getting to see, you know, for 30 seconds before everybody else, this cool spoiler, but also they were the ones who got to share this news with the community. So I think that was really awesome idea. I think that was a really cool thing to kind of witness and see. And we got some cool cards out of it. So I'm going to kind of quickly go over them. If you haven't seen them already, you can look on the Facebook page by searching up the hashtag #GoForValhalla. You see all these pictures, so I'm just going to quickly run through them and see what our thoughts are. So we have, first up, day 1 spoiler was Skulls, the Valkyrie of the Future. She is a 2-drop 6/5 that whenever she attacks, you produce white. So she's a base rare. And what do you guys kind of think about this card?
I think that this is one that potentially excites me a lot for Worlds, where the format's going to be like very narrow and potentially like very like sort of pigeoning us into very color controlled decks. But also depending on how the format shapes out, like I do love me a white go white aggressive deck, and this is a very like potentially tempo positive play. Like there's risk involved in that this is a 2-drop with no enter effect, but it does mean that suddenly on turn 3 you're either multi-spelling like into double 2-drops on turn 3 or turn 3 4-drop in an aggressive deck with 0 loss in actual aggressive tempo. And so I think it has potential, but there is a lot of risk. Like they clearly made sure that the card was not too overstated or anything. Like 500 toughness is a pretty relevant number, and that it puts a certain amount of 1-drop removal actually able to kill her. So there's a ceiling to how high she can get before people can easily adapt.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird rare to me. The rarity seems a little bit off to me. I mean, I wouldn't have looked at this twice if it was a common, but I think this card lives and dies by how survivable a 2-drop with 5 toughness is. If the Worlds format turns out to be very quick and doesn't have a whole lot of ways to interact with this, then there is a potential that just slamming a 4-drop on turn 3 is good enough in the limited card pool that Worlds is going to be. But beyond that, I don't think it's very exciting for New Frontiers, and it's probably not going to end up being that exciting for the Worlds format either.
Actually, I think it might be kind of cool for Worlds format, just because a lot of the spoilers we saw, and we'll go over this as we get through there, But at least the ones we saw from Gen Con, like they're kind of getting like really down to the roots of color identity, just like printing super basic, you know, mechanics. I feel like we got fire breathing, we got summon skeleton tokens when you die. And then this one's like the kind of confusing one where it's like, okay, why is white producing mana? But because it's doing it when it attacks, it almost seems like it's designed to be paying for itself, or like having a combat trick like pay for itself. So you can like attack with it, and then I'm sure that white's going to have some buff target attacking Resonator, or if your Resonator is blocked, you know, do this and that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of stuff that I expect to see from white, and that'll make those cards free so you can still play your 3-drop on turn 3 and continue to curve out while also protecting your aggression. Is kind of what I'm getting from this card, but of course we need to see more spoilers to see if that's true or not.
Yeah, I like it. I think it might be the start of a hint of what effects they are pulling from green, because Jeff has said in his stream that they are pulling some mechanics off green and putting them into other colors. Now that being said, we're going to talk about another spoiler here in just a second that might mitigate that, but maybe they've actually pulled ramp away from green, which I think would be interesting, and maybe they're pushing that more towards light, which I think would be pretty interesting. So I just kind of want to see that, but I agree with Frank. I think that this is having the 5 defense, and Brandon as well at that point, having that 5 defense I think is going to be what makes this card, you know, pushes it one way or the other. Like, how survivable is that? But I think we need to I think it's the start of finding balance, and so I'm excited if this is kind of the direction we're going in terms of balance and risk versus reward. That's the kind of direction I want to see us moving in for it. So hopefully we see more of that.
I guess I would also note, I would not even if it does see play in New Frontiers, which I think is a low percentage chance, I don't think it's going to happen within the first set. I think it's going to be just because the archetype it's playing into, unless there is really a bigger white like ramp strategy that they build into things nicely, the archetype it looks like it's built for, which is the second white archetype, the go wide, like sort of white weenies archetype, is just naturally going to funnel its support into pandas at first, since it's already a very fleshed out deck.
Fair enough. Next up, we had Carrier Dragon, 2-drop, 2/7, 1 red, 1 colorless dragon with flying. It says discard a card. This card gains 500 attack until the end of turn. Play this ability only once per turn. And we're gonna go the opposite way. Ryan, what do you think?
I'm kind of a fan of this card, kind of terrified. Like, there's a decent number of like synergies in New Frontiers that exist for discarding stuff. And in fact, like a lot of times I'm building a deck, I want to be able to discard cards out of my hand, but the only way I can do that is if I'm playing like specifically Charlotte or Scarlet as my ruler. So unfortunately this is in red, which is like the last color that I want to actually discard things in, but it's still just like a 2-mana 7/7 flyer is pretty strong. And a lot of like the overstated like minions we've seen in red have been specifically tied to Keurig and his strength counters. So this is kind of being generic and then being in the discard realm kind of makes me lean to think it's going to be like a Scarlet support type of card if that deck wants to be more aggressive. And it's strong. Definitely like a big downside, but like you don't have to do it all the time. You can even just have it as like a 700 defense blocker for the like 6/5 we saw. So I think in the Worlds format, especially just like overstated minions are going to do well. And again, that's just basing off the fact that it does seem we're kind of going back to the basics with these. But yeah, I'm not like super thrilled about it, but like they could print things that I could see this seeing play.
Sure. Brandon?
So in Time Spinning Witch, we got a 2-mana 9/7 flyer in Keurig where you have to remove a strength counter. And removing a strength counter from Keurig is significantly less of a cost than discarding a card, and that card has mostly been rotated out of most Keurig builds. It's like not good enough. If you have rewards for discarding cards, that's fine, but like if you don't draw those rewards, then like trading a card for 5 damage once like could be okay, but it's kind of more than that because you also had to play this card, so it's kind of like 2 cards for 5 damage. And then this gets attacked into a much easier than that 9/7 flyer does, where like after you attack with this, it's just a 2/7 on defense unless you want to continue to discard cards, but that doesn't really make much sense because then any card you're discarding, you're just trading to keep a 2/7 on board. And so all in all, this kind of compiles into a card that I don't think is going to be that good in either format. If this format is good for drafting. I think it's a very, very neat draft and sealed limited card, but I don't really see it seeing any constructed play.
Frank?
The thing that interests me is that this card almost feels like it's off color. So with like the descriptions we were giving of the 10 factions, this feels like this should have been a card in the Lich army, but dragons were pretty clearly in. Oh, I don't remember what the second of the 2 fire rulers was, but there was one that was like warriors into dragons. And so its type sort of implies it goes there, but its effect feels like something that the black deck would want. And so I'm curious if this is either a hint that they're trying to build just like a little bit of stuff that's like slightly off but can reward you for playing multicolor, even if this card is not particularly impressive, or if there is another element to that red faction that hasn't been spoiled yet. This card itself does not particularly excite me, but because the only way I can see this card getting particularly good is if there is a powerful, like, equivalent of like Dredge or Madness mechanic for Magic the Gathering. Like, this is almost verbatim a card that was important in an old Magic standard, but that was because it was an enabler for a bunch of really powerful cards. And I don't necessarily think that those will be here in this case. But it does give us interesting possible hints at what is going to be going on in the rest of spoiler season.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see that. The Phi Z, or I might be butchering that, the Chinese red ruler, the other one that's not ISIS, their like thematic archetype wasn't very well like described in the set. Like ISIS was talking about how it was a burn deck, and the Arthur was talking about +1/+1 counters, but Phi didn't really seem like he had any mechanical direction. It could be something like Madness. It could be rewards for discarding cards, and if that's the case, then obviously this card gets a lot better.
Yeah. And that is also one that would like give us hints that like if the mana is good, or if later into the block we get better mana, that black-red could be a future potential powerful archetype.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what. I mean, red is weirdly enough, red has dealt with discard a lot in the past, with in weird ways. You know, it's teetered in and out of whether that's actually been good in the terms of like, you know, Guinevere, you know, Our Lady laid to rest, and there's been lots of other interesting red things involving discard. So it'll be interesting to see if we see any new rewards that come off of it, and I think that is kind of what pushes this dragon kind of one way or the other, is whether or not we get some new better rewards to kind of replace some of the rewards that we're losing with rotation.
One thing I will say is that the only color archetype right now that like has a true dual stone going into the next set, assuming the dual stones rotate, we don't get any more, is actually red-black. So like we have this guy in red, and then a lot of discard synergy in black, and hypothetically more coming with like other like reanimation mechanics. And if you look at the red like black rulers, we've got Scarlet, which is going to want to play all the discard stuff anyway. So this could be like an extra activator for it. You've got Freyla, who gets a free card back at the end of every turn. So this is just like kind of consistently a 7/7 as long as you get guys to pitch. Not like great, but like I don't really know what the format's going to look like, or what like they're planning to do with a ban list or anything like that. So there are cards that could be printed in worlds that could exist where this is going to see play, but like I don't know. You know, it's too early to tell.
Right.
Well, it would be interesting if there was actually this stuff such that like you functionally treat this card as pay 300 life to do this effect, and there's other cards that want you to do that, so you're running just the best Dark Elves or some irrelevant Dark Elf because they're just functionally pay 300 life to keep looping this card for bonuses.
Yeah.
Right. Next up, we go into our first green spoiler, who is Kotaro, Ninja of the Wind. 2-drop 6/6 with quick cast. He's a cat ninja. And this is the first instance of the enter keyword coming back. So we don't have the updated CR in terms of what this exactly means. Old school enter keyword meant just when playing from hand. So we'll have to see up to this point whether this just means that the functioning of the enter keyword is going to match what has been the when this card enters the field. So let's preface, that idea, that this could be returning back to having to cast from hand and not being able to like cheat in things for enter effects, or it could be that the enter keyword is just going to replace the text of when this card enters the field, which I think has some serious implications for Wanderer. But more speaking of World format and New Frontiers right now, he says enter, produce one of any color, and he says spend this will only to play chance. So this is, I think, very interesting because, again, I think the idea of the Ninja Cats is going to be, their whole idea is, I think, supposed to be utility, right? That's the whole kind of concept with other ninja tools. So I need to see, obviously, probably what their ninjutsus chants do, right? So potentially this is probably, I think, probably going to be a staple in like Ninja Cat decks, right? Because essentially, if they get like 1-drop quick cast chance, or even outside of Ninja Cats, there are some really good 1-drop quick cast chance, and with no Severing Winds in the format, this guy becomes 2 green, quick cast in a 6/6 body, which is pretty great, but also follows it up by giving you 1 will access to be able to cast any quick cast chance in your hand, which I think could have some serious implications. We've got some really good, like, I think of things like Flourishing Hope or Miscalculation, or what are some other ones I'm thinking of? Nope, they're gone. Maybe you guys can speak to that more better than I can. But
Fair
anything
spell.
that Gil Lapis can search.
Fair spell. Anything Gil Lapis can search isn't necessarily quick cast.
Yeah, but you know all of the cards by heart, so like that's what you should be thinking about when you're thinking of 1-cost chance.
I guess that's fair. Nameless Mist, although that would have rotated.
Thought Control, Glint of
Thought
Insight.
Control, Glint. Yeah, like just. This is I'm very curious to see what comes out of this card, is what I'm saying. But I think that this card, of all the ones we've seen so far, is probably the one where I'm like, yep, this card is gonna be important, which I think is pretty cool. So I do like the restriction that it's only to play chance, but in a format with no Severing Winds, that could be probably pretty strong. So we'll have to see.
So, sorry to be the naysayer on this one, but the problem I think this card is going to run into, even with Severing Winds gone, is that what it wants to do is it wants you to be a deck that has a bunch of reactive, like a bunch of low-cost interaction, and then quick cast all your threats. And unfortunately, we have that deck in the format, and its threats all cantrip now because of Dollman. So, once again, this is a Sherry podcast. She's the worst.
We got back to it. There you go.
If someone miraculously kicks her off of a cliff, which wouldn't even work, she has freaking flying. I hate this. I can't even kill her in my metaphors. Sorry, but if for some reason she doesn't exist, it is interesting, and it might actually mean that we would see, like, that would make even this card, like, less important to me than the fact that CL from several sets back suddenly becomes playable. If you recall, he is a 3-drop, 6/7 quick cast, and when he enters, you produce 2 in any combination, with no limits. And he's obviously seen no play because A, that's a little bit to invest, but also B, Severing Winds exist, and that's naturally playing into Severing Winds. But if the deck that wants to play this comes to exist, I would not be surprised to see functionally 1 mana 6/7, 1 mana 6/6 into 1 mana spell be a line of play that is potentially powerful.
I'm incredibly interested by this ability to produce mana of any color, given that dual stones are rotating. So if this is something that we see more from the Cat Ninja, and their like utility is kind of producing will of any color, then that really opens up that deck to just have a wide variety of options, especially when you take in all the cards from New Frontiers. Because like I said before, without dual stones, like the only true dual stone is red-black. So when green gets to have this card and hopefully like more like it, because it does seem like a bag of tricks if you can just produce will that you can only use for chance, but it can be any color, then like your deck building option opens up to a lot of really interesting things. Like you said, you get Flourishing Hope you can just cast off this guy, so you can like come in and block something, and like 1 mana 6/6 isn't bad either. So anytime you're just doing your reactive play, like if you have 2 green mana open, actually you have 1 mana of any color and there's a 6/6 coming out. So like cards like there's a +6/+6 buff. You drop this in, and then you buff it with the 1 mana it produces. Now you're blocking with a 12/12 out of nowhere when you just had an open board. Like, there's some cool tricks that can go on here, and I'm curious to see what else goes into this deck. But like, I'm not writing it off yet. I'm not like super impressed, but I like the options that are there.
I'm really glad that Severing is rotating when this comes out, because if Severing was still around, then obviously this card is unplayable.
Obviously.
But I really hope that this effect is good in the Worlds format. I can't say right now because we don't know, any 1-cost spell in the format besides the plus barrier white one that we'll get to later. But even that right there is a pretty good combo, right? So you have there's a card that we're going to talk about later that gives +8/+8 barrier, no chase for white. And so what Ryan was saying about the open board with the +6/+6 buff, well, imagine like push that in, +8/+8 barrier block on just 2 mana, and that could be a pretty interesting trick. But maybe we'll see even better than that. I really a little bit nervous about green getting access to all the colors while we don't have dual stones, because I just don't want it to be a format where like you have to play wins so that you can play all the broken cards. It's kind of like in Worlds 2016, Melfi was extremely good because then you could play like into Red Boy, into Hook, into your green deck. And I hope that it doesn't become like that again, where like there's a Melfi type card that we all have to play. But otherwise, this card's really hard to say the power level of without knowing the 1 mana chance.
Yeah. Moving on to our first darkness spoiler, we had Skeleton Knight. Use a 4-drop 8/8, 2 black and 2 skeleton. It says when this card is put into a graveyard from the field, put 2 100/100 darkness skeleton resonator tokens into the field. And I will preface this by, it says the flavor text is destroy 1 and 2 more shall rise. I wanted these freaking tokens to have a little bit better stats than freaking 1/1 for a 4-drop.
Want them to be 8/8s?
I would want them to be like 3/3s.
Destroy 1 and your shins are still standing there menacingly, just ready to go to town,
Right.
This is not...
Like, I wanted these guys to be like 3/3s. Not a perfect split of the 8/8 stat line in half, right? Because they've, you've died a little bit, right? But I think that making 2 3/3 tokens would have been much better, especially considering he's a 4-drop. Like, the one, in my opinion, putting 2 1/1 darkness skeleton resonator tokens is like awful.
I agree. However, I think that this could be extremely powerful just because there's going to be 2 of them. Like, if they print more, like, Banish a Resonator, do something powerful type effect. Like, we haven't seen that since Guinevere, and they've been very scared of it. But with, like, some of the directions they've been talking about for, like, the black archetypes, I kind of hope that happens. Where it's like, Banish a Resonator, destroy 2 Resonators your opponent controls kind of stuff. Like, that's...
So, like, more backside of Altar effects that are powerful?
Altar, yeah, that's the card that I like. I like that card. Good call, Frank.
That Demonic Dead is rotating, I think it's safe to start printing those kinds of effects again. Yeah. And this is going to be really insane if they do anything that has a powerful sack outlet. In the white Fair deck right now, if you play Altar and Fair, flip and get Oberon, that's like a ridiculously powerful way to clear a board that an opponent has. And I think this could play a similar role to that. Obviously, you can't flip as early as Fair can flip. And I mean, casting this, you can't cast it as fast as Fair can flip, But I think if there is a sack outlet deck, this is very likely one of the big fuels for it.
Yeah, like the fact that this card costs 4 mana kind of makes me think that it's going to be a very powerful type effect. Because when we look at like other 4-drops that exist, like I can't even think of a 4-drop right now that's weaker than this card. So it lends me to believe that there will be something powerful that you will be doing with these skeleton resonator tokens or something like that. But again, we don't have all the cards, so we don't know. So hopefully, other than that, it's like pretty mediocre.
This card to me makes me sad that we don't have a few rounds at Worlds that are some form of limited, because this to me feels like, if you remember Thunder Phantom from Time Spinning Witch, this feels like that. It's a common enabler that's a little bit expensive, so that you can't enable, so that you're relying on the ruler to enable it in constructed formats, but so that if they have put powerful sacrifice effects in there, you actually have something to get value with those. Like, this also makes me wonder if there isn't in particularly powerful 3-drop sacrifice effect that this is built to be curved off of and limited.
Potentially. Certainly plausible. We will definitely have to see what more of the darkness runes and like bomb side of Lich is to maybe make use of these 1/1 tokens. Next up, we have hands down the worst spoiler. We have the blue Messenger of Death, who is a 2-drop 6/4 beast, although the picture is very clearly a bird. I don't think Forza Will knows what birds are.
Ray is a beast.
But it is a beast with flying.
Well, yeah, that's why
it's something.
not a bird. It couldn't have flying if it was a bird.
That's fair. Although Ray is a beast that doesn't have flying, but we'll right. So it's a 2-drop 6/4 beast with flying and an awakening for 4 that says enter, your opponent banishes a resonator. This just bad. Moving on.
I mean, there are situations, but again, this is something I would write off pretty easily, I think.
Like, the fact that the awakening makes it a 6-drop and you don't even get to choose what they did sacrifice, I think is the worst.
Yeah.
Removal is like so bad that you need this, then that's something. But like, this isn't even actually targeted removal, and like by 6 mana, like it could just have other things to sack. So yeah, complete garbage.
Yeah.
Probably good in limited, right? Like that's what you want in limited. I don't know.
It's
very...
too big.
See, this is even slow for limited.
I know it's
removal.
slow for limited, but I just wanted to join the club, Cool Kids Club, you know?
In limited, this exists in the same format as Mr. Skelly Man we just saw. There's gonna
Right,
be
exactly.
one skeleton.
Yeah, that's fair, yeah.
Going, you're retarded, Mr. Beast.
Well, they made us pay 4 mana to get tokens. They're making us pay 6 mana to banish, guys. They're just inflation really happened in Forcible, guys. Back in my day, we could pay 0 mana.
I think we can make up. I think blue can make up for it with its next spoiler.
Oh boy.
That, or I guess the other option this could mean, although I don't think this is inherently true because this was a ruler they just printed, but this could mean that Loki is somehow making Awakening on Resonators very much cheaper. That feels like that's creeping on Time Spinning Witches territory. Pretty hard for something they just printed and was a marquee card for half of a cluster.
Right, so
Yeah.
Time Spinning Witch can only pay for Chant Awakenings, though. So if Loki like only reduces Resonator Awakenings, then that's not super encroaching. Like they don't actually overlap at all.
Yeah. Okay, agreed. I was saying it's not impossible. Just saying like it feels a little close. But also if they
That's
do
a
that,
good idea,
guaranteed
actually.
I'm playing both.
I didn't
I'm
even
playing
think
both
about
of those
that.
together when against you on stream.
Yeah, we'll have to see. But blue definitely, I think, made up for its Messenger of Death with the sex spoiler. Our boy Lancelot, he back. Lancelot the Glass Knight, 3-drop 6/6 machine, 1 blue and 2.
Lancelot. This guy's blue. Hashtag not my Lancelot.
He has an enter of put a +1/+1 counter on each machine resonator you control. So he comes in after his enter as a 7/7, and he says remove 3 +1/+1 counters from a resonator you control, destroy target resonator. So it all has to be from 1 resonator for the destroy, or remove a total of 10 1/1 counters from any number of resonators you control. He says J/resonators your opponent controls lose all abilities until end of turn. Period. Second sentence, destroy all resonators your opponent controls. So he is a negate your opponent's field, then blow it up for 10 at instant speed for 10 1/1 counters.
Second effect only destroy Resonators? It does.
It destroys. It does not destroy J.
All resonators.
It destroys all resonators, lets them keep their J resonator ruler, but their J ruler has no abilities until end of turn.
Woo, lads. So I think the thing that I'm really hoping for is like a 1-drop machine that's made out of +1/+1 counters. That's like like a 1 mana, a 1 blue machine that says this enters the battlefield. It's a 0/0, enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters, or something like Puss in Boots from 2016.
Where you
It's
roll.
Like no, we're not going to bring force back. I mean, like it just enters with 3 +1/+1 counters on it or something. So it's like a 1 blue 4/4, except 3 of that 4 is +1/+1 counters, and then you just slam Lancelot, and then it's a removal spell.
Yeah.
That
Pretty
would be
cool.
neat. Or just like playing a billion 1-drop machines, slam Lancelot, put a bunch of +1/+1 counters on things, and then wipe the board. That just sounds like fun. This card looks wicked powerful. I mean, the other thing about this card is that the threat of activation is insane. So like.
Yeah, especially if they have ways to gain 10 +1/+1s at instant speed.
Well, yeah, okay, sure, that's just ridiculous. But like, even if you don't have a way to generate +1/+1 counters, and you just slam this while you have like 2 machines with counters on it, what's your opponent gonna do? Because you don't just have to immediately activate it, and it just like, constantly sits there threatening to kill anything they play. Like, God forbid you're ahead on board when this situation happens. Like, they'll just never catch up. I don't know. I think this card is.
I will stop you
potential
real
to be
quick
good.
because you have to remove 3 +1/+1s from a resonator, so they all 3 have to come from the same resonator.
And I'm talking about this scenario in which like you have machines that are made of counters and.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
And like you slam Lancelot with 2 abilities to activate on board, which like I struggle to imagine is like that hard.
Yeah.
Like especially if they're gonna give Lancelot this kind of like +1 to all your machines type effects, it can't be the only one.
Yeah, as long as there's like good activators for this, it's going to be insane because it really is just a 0 mana ability kill target thing. And when like 0 mana things are really good, we've been over this before. This is a little bit more interactable, I feel, where you can like kill the thing with the most +1/+1 counters on it before you play your big threat, but it's still just innately strong. So
I think it is very strong, but I think he has to. By himself, sure, his effects are really strong, but I think in order to make use of his effects, he has to make use of other things on the board, which I think balances it pretty nicely. Because, you know, if you're kind of keeping ahead of things, like, if he's the only thing you play, right? So, like, in Brandon's scenario, the next thing of, like, you know, play this Slam Ham, and the next turn, this, like, 1-drop, you can play that next turn, it becomes a removal spell, right? But if, like, you slam Lancelot into an empty board, then you just paid 3 for a 7/7, and, like, that's not super great. Like, Lancelot does better the better your board state is, right? So I think that's good balance, but it does definitely have a potential to be very strong.
Yeah, definitely want to see more cards for this archetype and see where it goes, but I am excited overall.
Also, this art style is, like, gorgeous.
I would agree.
Did you read the flavor text on this card?
The last thing Lancelot's enemies see is their own reflection on the glass.
Oh, if we're diving into the flavor, Jeremy,
Oh, no,
can
I
you
just wanted to point
retroactively
this
change
out.
the audio?
Not that rabbit hole.
Can you like go back to the first episode and make this my answer for best husbando in Force of Will?
Yeah, I'll go back and edit it.
Perfect.
So we had one more spoiler for Gen Con, which was Belial, the evil from the scriptures. Let's talk about some very impressive artwork as well. So it's a 6-drop 12/12, 3 darkness, 3 colorless, fallen angel resonator with flying. If your life is 1,000 or less, you only have to pay 3 darkness for this card. New enter tag, destroy all non-fallen angel resonators, and whenever a resonator is put into a graveyard from the field, you deal 100 damage to your opponent. Frank, what do you think about this card?
Oh my god. So this, I think this card will potentially see some play, but it's also the kind of card that you can knowingly play around. Like, if you're a deck that can get beat by a field wipe, then you we had this scenario before with Stealth, and admittedly it was hard, but there was an aggressive Knights deck that played around it, and the key was like keeping track of your opponent's life total so that you could put pressure on them at the right moment. And so I don't think that this will be played for 3 as often as some people might think, but I think that ability can create just enough of a tempo gain for the type of deck that wants to run this to like still appreciate having it. It's obviously a powerful effect. It is reminiscent of like an old ruler from the original Valhalla, which is pretty cool. And like it's one I'm excited to play, but 6 is a pretty high barrier to entry. We are losing Final Battle, so we don't have a 1-mana field wipe anymore. So like this may be like worth reaching to, but this also definitely needs them to not reveal a cheaper Wrath effect. But it's one I am tentatively excited for, but I do have one small gripe with this card. I really wish it had been Fallen/Angel, and then it just destroyed all non-Fallen resonators. I'm fine with like the multi-name creature types, but I would like to not see overlap to where like we have Fallen Angels and Angels. Separate things.
Yeah, but do you really want like Moonlit Palace or like Moonlit Kingdom to be buffing this guy? Like that's a flavor fail.
Well, then you just make him Fallen.
Sure.
Then why does he have wings if he's fallen? He can fly. That doesn't make any sense. Come on, Frank.
Frank, what's going on?
Why is he
Wing
fallen?
You guys,
flying. Birds have established this.
We have other fallen angels already. Satoliel from the Bengal 3. I think he's also Valhalla ruler. He's the guy who you tap, play a black, exile a guy you control to bring back a guy from your graveyard. He's a fallen angel. I found this out because I wanted to put him on my Epic Stories deck, and I tried to search him up with Celestial Wingslayer after my opponent looked at me with the eyes of an idiot. So I learned pretty quickly that fallen angels are not angels. And I assume that will be very relevant in this set, since I think Way's getting a lot of the angel stuff.
Well, I mean, it is Adam's mechanic.
Yep. So that's what we're getting, and I like this guy just because he looks cool. I think 1,000 or less is a lot bigger of a barrier than like the 2,000 or less that we saw with Stealth, and it is a lot easier to kind of play around. There is that like, okay, once they hit 3 mana, I need to keep them above 1,000. I need to kill them before they hit 6,000. Like that's, I mean 6 mana. So that's like a pretty easy thing I think to do for a lot of decks that apply any sort of pressure. So I'm interested to see what else is going on this side of the black archetype. But this card I'm not super thrilled about overall. And again, I guess it does depend on how many wrath effects we get, and like the machines obviously wants to go wide, so also looking at how many other archetypes want to go wide with their boards.
I guess the other thing would be we are losing a bunch of things that would make it easier to find low copies of this. Like we're losing a lot of our resonator search effects that toolbox decks have used. So it's going to be harder to like run a cheeky like, oh, this is a spell that's secretly a resonator in a toolbox deck. I think that will also hold him down for a while.
Yeah. So I apologize that I keep going back to like the Worlds 2016 format, but I think it's like the closest thing we have, or at least that I have, to this kind of format that we're talking about. And in that format, Fiery Chariot Red Boy was like a real aspect of that format. And admittedly, that card was a little bit different because we had like Sacred Elf and Melfi, which were ramping. And if we don't get those kind of things, then maybe a 6-drop board wipe's not as good. But I envision this filling a lot of the same role in a deck that wants to go slow and wants to go forward. Granted, Red Boy only hit their board, and so like you could play these ramp spells, ramp into Red Boy, where if you play a bunch of ramp creatures, ramp into this, you're going to lose your ramp creatures, which is a little different. Black has a history of paying life for effects, though. So like returning Demonic Dead from the graveyard, paying for Final Battle. We get these effects all the time, and I think that it would not be that weird if we had some kind of resonator that like paid life once per turn to get a buff, or a chant that cost life to pay. And so you could be sitting at this comfortable 15, 14 life, comfortable for your opponent, where they think you can't cast it, and then you just activate an effect, put yourself below 1,000, slam this guy. And I think that's probably a line of play we're almost certainly going to see. I mean, that Black gets those effects all the time. So I'm very excited for this card. I envision it being very relevant in the Worlds format.
I think having this kind of creature-based board wipe, I mean, Red Boy was strong for that very reason, and so now we have another thing that's going to probably fill a similar kind of role. So we'll just have to see how accessible the ramp is, or how accessible triple black becomes in terms of allowing you to go into other colors too. I think that's a big piece of it. They'll have to determine whether or not this guy is as widespread use as Red Boy was in that format. To kind of keep us going on time, I think we got a lot of the whites on Monday or Sunday when we record this on Monday. Last night was Sunday. We had the white spoilers for Adam. Psychart kind of spoiled. I don't want to talk about all of them, but I do kind of want to focus specifically on a few cards. His Magic Stone, his J-Ruler side, and his runes. So I'm going to kind of give a brief overview of all of them, just real quick, and then have you guys kind of share your thoughts. So keep in mind, here's what we know of the runes. Runes can be in the main deck, but they can also serve as being in the rune deck. If they're in the rune deck, you can only have one copy of any of the rune. You can only cast them at the normal, as far as we know, you can only cast them at their normal casting speed. It's not like Sherry. And once you flip it, it costs divinity as well as the will cost. You can only have face up in your rune deck a divinity that is equal to or less than the divinity of your ruler, which at this point is 10 for all of them. And so those are just kind of things to kind of know as a concept. And during a turn, unlike Grimoire, where it's once per turn, flip up a card, do something, you can cast as many runes as you want during your turn, or at their right speed, provided you have divinity and will to do so. But once a rune has been flipped face up, you can't use that rune again. Like, you can't cast the same rune a bajillion times. Like, each rune in your rune deck can be used once, unless you have some way to flip it face down, because flipping it face up is part of the cost. So, with that out of the way, and obviously, hopefully we learn more about runes soon, let's talk about Adam. So, on his front side, he has Divinity 10, Judgments for 2 white and 1, Energizes for white, no other abilities. This is the standard for all of the different rulers that are coming out in this format. And he is, on his back side, Adam Psychart, the Shimmering Rabbit. He is an 8/12 rabbit with Divinity 10. And he says, Runes in your rune area gain quick cast. So he makes it so all runes that once he's flipped, that's just kind of static effect, is that your runes are now quick cast even if they couldn't, which lends to the fact that like you have to actually follow the timing of runes. And he says whenever you play a rune, choose one. You either gain 500 life, rest target resonator, or target J/res gains 500 defense until end of turn. So that's him. So we'll come back to him in just a second. Again, I'm trying to get through these a little quick. And then we have some runes. We have Light of the Moon, which is a 1-drop Divinity 1 quick cast chant rune. I think that they have chant as a subtype is very helpful because this means they can be canceled. So it's a 1-drop Divinity 1 quick cast rune that says you can pay 1 white less, so make it free if it's in your rune area. And it says you, the player, gain barrier chant until end of turn. So that's our first one. Our next one is, let's see. There were some other ones that were spoiled.
I think that was the only rune that got spoiled.
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was the only rune. So then his stone. So there's Adam Sykar's front side, his first rune, and his stone is the Magic Stone of Omniscience, special magic stone that taps to produce white, or tap and pay 1 to produce 1 red, 1 blue, 1 green, or 1 darkness, and spend this will only to play runes. So I think this is a pretty solid indicator that we're not getting dual stones, but it looks like this stone is your kind of filter to make use of. It seems like Adam's probably going to make use of the rune deck pretty heavily, and maybe even becomes the like splashing runes kind of ruler. So yeah, those are the 3 cards. We're not going to dig into the other ones. Definitely recommend you just go check out the Facebook page to look at what the other ones are. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about the J ruler side, the first rune that we're seeing, and the stone.
So the stone lives or dies by the other runes, right? Like, is there a rune that is so good in a color that's not white that you're willing to pay 1 more for it? Maybe. And if there is, then you'll play this stone, and you'll play that rune, and it'll be great. I mean, I kind of hope that's not the case, because if that is the case, then that rune is so good that the ruler that is in that color will probably be a step above the others, so I kind of hope not. The Adam Sykar ruler, though, I think the really cool mode on there, like 500 life is cool, and the gaining +0/+5 is cool, but rest target resonator is a very aggressive ability, and so I really hope that there is and we kind of see in some of the angels that some of them are quick cast, high flying, and flying is actually an aggressive ability, and so I really hope that we see a white aggressive deck that plays a bunch of angels, flips Adam, flips some runes to tap all their flyers, and then alphas with flyers. And I think that's kind of a neat deck archetype to go into. I really wish this wasn't the first rune they spoiled, because I kind of don't like it. A, it doesn't seem very good to me. B, it's going in kind of a direction that I really feared that they might take runes, which is the Scheherazade kind of blasting a certain deck or certain archetype kind of direction. Like, because this rune specifically, like, there's some decks that this would do like actually nothing against, and some decks, like if Isis has a strong burn theme and the burns are targeted, then it's just like nuts against her or something like that, like countering a 4-mana 11 to face or whatever kind of spell. And so like I kind of don't like that, because I don't want kind of devolve into like we both sit down, we both flip over our runes. Oh, did I bring the runes that hose your deck? Yes, I did. Okay, I win. Oh no, I didn't. All right, I lose, kind of thing. And I know this is like a fierce exaggeration over like one rune that's probably not even going to be that good. But like it's like it's indicative of a direction I wish they hadn't taken, and I really hope that the other runes aren't like this.
Yeah, so this rune seems incredibly powerful to me as like a sideboard option, just because it's going to be free. Like, you can play this in any deck. It doesn't actually cost white mana in the rune deck. And I'm kind of like just looking at what cards this actually affects. And it's basically Burgeoning Despair, which is pretty relevant. The Shuffle ability on Shayla's Foresight, and then like 4 or 5 burn spells, which is like pretty much exactly what I expected. So if there's any like red burn archetype, it's going to have a difficult time, I think, getting through this, especially when this can be sided into literally any deck, because it doesn't actually cost white mana. So we'll have to see. Definitely underwhelming, and I would hope that a 0-mana rune is underwhelming. But yeah, like Brandon said, I'm really terrified that it is just kind of like able to hose a certain type of deck like very easily. and that's not what I don't want Scheherazade to happen again. I don't want the rune deck to be the answer everything kind of thing going on here, especially with Adam being able to play runes from any color basically at instant speed. Like, it's just Scheherazade. Like, I'm already getting flashbacks. Please don't do this. But yeah, so hopefully nothing too spooky there. Pretty unimpressed by the ruler overall. I don't really value his abilities very highly. Like, they exist, and that's cool. It's better than nothing, but I'm not like, oh yeah, you get to do this when you cast a rune. It's just like, in situations that will be good, and in other situations it will be bad. So yeah, not too impressed, and a little fearful from what we've seen so far.
So this makes me think in an entirely different direction. So this card to me screams that this is trying to be sort of a free enabler to what Adam is trying to do on his backside. So because it's just you gaining it, this can be cast at any time, regardless of whether or not it's relevant. So this sort of, if you're playing Adam, this sort of also gains the text rest target resonator, which is a relevant tempo play. And also, like, I know you didn't want to go into the other cards, but there's also a 1-mana rabbit that tells a lot. So there's a 1-mana 4/4 were-rabbit, and then if you have 2 or more runes, sort of like the legend mechanic, if you have 2 or more runes revealed, it gets +2/+2 in flying. So if this and another rune that costs 0 that you can just sort of willy-nilly throw out there exist, Adam suddenly has like 1-mana 6/6 flyers, or like late game tempo to get rid of blockers, and like that feels sort of like what this is supposed to be poking at, and they gave it a very hopefully innocuous effect to enable that. But it could also just be that this is a safe first rune to show us, and they're saving the flashier stuff for later.
Yeah, it's possible this is just like, let's think of the worst ability we could put on a card and then make it cost 0, so that if you really just want a 0-mana rune, you have it, but it's pretty much useless. I see what you're saying there, and I can kind of get behind that.
Because it definitely, like, the Resonator plus Adam's ability definitely makes me think that there is, like, his side is leaning on this white, like, runes, like, number of runes matter theme. Like, sort of like the, like, I guess, like, it sucks to keep comparing to Sherry, but like sort of like the Sherry decks that wanted to flip quickly so they could play Djinns and some of the cards that just got really potent when you had a lot flipped. This is an enabler for that sort of thing.
Couldn't you do a useless effect that didn't hose a specific deck though? I don't know, like +0, +4 to a resonator.
Doesn't most of the burn spells right now though say like just your opponent?
Sure, and
no, the old ones do. Like the playable ones do because they're older, but the current ones we've got Ancient Impact. Ancient Impact, even though it's uncounterable in Scarlet, is target player. Fictitious Fire is the burn spell that's like designed for Scarlet because it does more damage if you have null. That's just target player. Callous Blaze is just the Bombard Memory player, 6 target player. Fiend Fire, deal 200 multiplied by X, a target player or resonator, pay X, gain that much life. And those are all the cards that currently say target player.
Yeah, so we will have to see what Isis kind of
but
gains.
Power Spike doesn't, right? So like, and Power Spike is what I'm like, if they print a 4-mana like 11 to your opponent, that's what I'm more concerned about. Like, I don't mind one card countering. Like,
it's like the modal spells that do either player or resonator that seem to do it, except for Ancient Impact. For some reason, Ancient Impact can hit yourself in the face if you really. Oh, Ancient Impact can hit resonator. That's why. Never mind. So yeah, anything that can hit either player or resonator says target player, but Ancient Impact, or the 4-mana deal 11, 4-mana deal 12, those cards do say
right.
target player, your opponent.
okay.
Yep. So we'll have to see what else kind of comes out of it. I think this is probably a pretty safe rune for them to show off first. And again, that whole idea of it does definitely seem that Adam's probably going to make use of splashable runes, or maybe not really necessarily having high divinity on his runes to make use of his backside a little bit better, which I think I'd be okay with, provided they're not cheap divinity-wise, cheap cost-wise, and like insanely strong. So we'll just have to see kind of what comes out of it. Just a heads up for those of you guys who are... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
Because there's just one other card I really kind of wanted to talk about. Is that okay?
Sure,
if we just do one more?
Sure.
We have time. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to find it.
Is it Protection of the Angels?
No, it's the 3-mana quick cast angel.
The Spaleg,
So-
the Angel of
Spaleg,
War.
the Angel of War. So she's white, white, white for an 8/8 angel with quick cast, flying, and first strike. So I think this card might look really underwhelming to some people because it's just a body. But I think the lesson of the Scheherazade dolls and like patrolling guard doll is that like good bodies with quick cast are just better than they look. And so I think this card is actually one of the better spoilers that we've seen so far. And I think this is going to be one of the better cards in the Worlds format. And so don't sleep on this card, even if it looks kind of weak at first blush.
I can agree, potentially. It kind of traded in getting higher stats like Patrolling Card Doll does with having flying and first strike, which I think is kind of relevant.
Trade to me.
But also, just keeping in mind that first strike doesn't work on block, just on attack. So, and it is triple white, which it will be interesting to see.
If we're in a no dual stones format, then like
It's not super
You
crazy.
probably
but-
want to wait, and if you're not, then you can't really play this card. So it is kind of rewarding good deck building, I feel.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I do like this card a lot. It does, again, it kind of feels, this is another card that I would say is like an example of like we're going back to the roots of the color identities. Like I just want a beefy flyer that's like pretty good stats for the mana cost, and then just has first strike and quick cast attached to it, which makes it a very versatile card to be able to use. Definitely a fan. I think like even though it doesn't have first strike when it's being attacked, like just enforceable in general, like there are enough defensive combat tricks in white that it'll probably do okay. And I think first strike's just a mechanic we haven't seen in a pretty long time, I think. So
Yeah, I'm excited to see it kind
I
of
also
make
like
use
first
of more.
strike paired with a ruler that has like rest target thing. Because
yeah.
then this becomes a removal spell. Like this potentially becomes a removal spell that lives through trading on par with itself, which is pretty decent.
Yeah, first strike plus target attack is generally like one of the stronger things we've seen in Force of Will. So then, like like you're saying, we do have a rule that says a rest target guy, and if you've got a flyer, you basically have target attack, unblockable, and first strike, which is definitely something that you have to be worried about. So, I definitely agree with your assessment here on this card, Brandon.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I'm excited to commentate on people playing this card at Worlds. That's what I'm excited to see. So speaking of moving towards Worlds, we do have one final weekend, at least in the United States, of World qualifying tournaments. We have GP Denver, which I will be at doing the live stream for, as well as ARG Nats, which I know that Ryan, you are going to.
I am indeed.
So best of luck to you at that, and I know that
Appreciate
Brandon and I will be seeing you at Denver, right?
yes,
Frank, are you hanging out this weekend?
I will be
come
there
to
in
Denver.
Or you also be at Denver? Awesome. Well, we'll be
I
good
will
to see
forget you guys then, all right?
So we'll do a teacher's lounge with the three of us and not Ryan. So just kidding, no. But we have that this weekend, so hopefully you will check out the live stream for it or participating in one of those events, and so hopefully you have a lot of fun with that. But to kind of wrap things up, we have our goof question for the week, and I promise that my answer will not be last audience again. It is, if you could have any card in your likeness, what would it be, and what would it look like? So I will go first, and I will say that I would choose
I have
Grim.
a quick question before we get started.
Go ahead.
Are we following like the rules of like the last two worlds? Because the rules are it has to be a resonator, and it can't be a J ruler, and
Aaron is on lightning strike and Quinn is on water
I
magic.
made
How
this
could...
up. It can't be a J ruler. That was the only thing. And,
Yeah,
it
so
can't- sorry, it can be a chance. It can't be like their rule is it couldn't be cross-gendered, but with the new Facebook app, you can change your gender no problem. So yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay,
No J
so
ruler.
I like their
okay.
no ruler rule though.
No ruler / Jade ruler, and I would pick Grim, the rightful king, and I would have the artwork be myself sitting in the throne as Grim. But also just like sitting in my lap would be my daughter Alice in a little like cosplay of like Alice in Wonderland. So it'd be me just sitting there with like this big honking sword sitting in the throne, but then just have my daughter sitting in my lap as Alice. And I could even have my son Coda as like a little tiny baby Millium. Like I'd probably, I don't know, I'd just make it my whole family. So forget it. It's not just me. It's my whole family of like my wife is Pandora, me is Grim the Rightful King, and then my two kids is like Milliam and baby Alice. That'd be my card art.
That's cute. can't even.
Ryan?
do that.
You guys know I have to go last because I.
Oh, right.
Nope, you're next. Ryan.
No, you're next this time. You're next this time.
I mean, I have a backup if you really force me to go, but no, somebody. Anyone else? Anyone?
Nope, you have to go next.
I'll take it if you want.
Oh,
Excellent. You
okay.
take
So
it.
Ryan, what's your guess for Brandon?
Ooh, oh no, I can't even. Oh, jeez.
I'm super
It's gotta
selling
be
out.
Mikage. It's gotta be something. All right, I'll let you go. But I think it's gonna have like Mikage on it or something. One of Mikage's daughters. I don't
No,
know.
it's not. It's kind of like super sellouty, but I think I'd just do Fair Spell. I think it's the kind of card that's going to be popular for a while. It's a card that the art is very easy to just put another person in, so you can kind of have me just doing the same Fair Spell pros. I actually just like that card a lot more than I think people give it credit for. Like yeah, it kind of like combined with Severing Winds and combined with Green being broken, it's like kind of put a damper on the format. But I think like when so oppressively green and cancel spell-y heavy, that Fair Spell is just a fun card. I think it's neat. It's nice to have around, and so I think I'd do that one. Plus, it's a card that it's going to be playable, basically for as long as it's in New Frontiers, and so I think that's what I'd pick.
And what
Frank?
does it look like?
Oh yeah, didn't he just say like just him doing the Fair Spell pose?
Yeah.
Okay. Ryan's cheating his way into going last again.
Nope.
I'm like I have a very clear idea. I'm just like trying to think of what card I want it to be on. So like just I already have the art and everything. I know what I want to do. Just let me find the card. You go.
I will pick Jupiter, Warlock of the Woodstar.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I love just quick cast resonators, like spell-like effects. I really want it to be a white one, but none of the ones I like have been like constructed playable. So sadly, we're gonna go with this guy instead. But like this one is still cool. This is a card I've cast quite a few times, and I want it to be just a picture of me, like falling from the sky, like holding a chair, very like a big wooden chair, very aggressively. He has an animal companion, so I would also like to have an animal companion, but mine will be a dog because I'm a classy individual. So it's just me and a Great Dane and a chair falling from the sky straight at you. Like I want the card's art to be like, so you're like, point OV, I'm clearly coming at you.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be kind of cool.
All right, dig it.
Okay, Ryan.
Okay, I don't think this card is like particularly good, but it's like the best I could do. So I want to be put on Time-Bound Spirit, and I want to like be actually sitting at like a table with like 15 cards in my hand and just getting sucked back into like a clock, because everyone knows I'm like a notorious like thinking player.
Oh,
so I just
that'd
want
be
the
good.
clock to just be owning my soul, and I'm just bound by time, and that'll be my card. Time-Bound Spirit.
Glorious thinking player.
That would be pretty cool artwork to see. I can picture it in my head, and that'd be pretty cool to see.
That's my
So
thing.
So
I was
there
just
you
looking
guys
through all
have
the
it.
time spending which cards, trying to figure out what it should go on. Like, yeah, that's time bound. All right, that's me. There we go.
So wait, hold up. We just make you the distortion of time then.
You
The
could also
whole
put that
card's
on
about the
distortion of time, I think. Yeah.
Either one. So there you guys have it. That is our 4 choices. Let us know in the poll on the Facebook page what you think, who had the best pick, and will Ryan regain his crown and
Who has
continue
the
his
crown right now?
ridiculous?
It's Bremont, right?
I think Bremont has the crown
Yeah.
currently, so we'll see if you can take it back from him. But we
Try.
will see you guys next week. Hopefully you guys have a great time at the tournament this weekend, and you've been enjoying all of the spoilers that we didn't get to talk about that have come out since we recorded. I know I am very much looking forward to seeing what's coming out this week. But until next time, this has been the Ruler School Teachers Lounge, hosted by myself, Jeremy Franklin, and Ryan Miles,
Goodbye, everybody.
Brandan Bremont,
Hopefully my audio works this time.
and Frank Closser.
Later.
We'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.